The envelope sat on my desk like a bad joke. It was thick, cream-colored, with the company logo printed in the top left corner. Around me, my co-workers were tearing theirs open. I could hear the reactions, quiet gasps, satisfied nods, one loud whistle from Marcus across the room. Patrice actually clapped her hands together and said, "Yes," before catching herself and lowering her voice. I held mine for a moment longer than I needed to. For 5 months, I had been doing the work of 2 people. When my colleague, Dion, quit without much warning back in March, our department head, Mr. Calloway, had come to me with that look, the one that said he needed a favor but was going to frame it as an opportunity. "Stephen, I need someone I can count on," he had said. "You're my guy." I had said yes. Of course I had said yes. I was 35 years old and trying to build something at this company. I believed in showing up. I believed in being reliable. I believed that hard work got noticed. I opened the envelope. I read the number twice. Then I looked up and watched Patrice still smiling at her own bonus, and something quiet and cold settled into my chest. I folded the letter back up, slid it into my jacket pocket, and said nothing to anyone. The conversation I overheard happened by accident. It was a Thursday afternoon, the week after the bonus letters arrived. I was refilling my water bottle near the break room when I heard Marcus's voice carrying through the half-open door. He was talking to Patrice. Mine was solid, Marcus was saying, but Chris told me his was almost 5 times his base salary percentage. 5 times. "That's not possible," Patrice said. That's what he said. Something about the new multiplier system they rolled out for people who hit stretch targets. I stood very still outside that door. A multiplier system. I had heard nothing about a multiplier system. In the 5 months since Dion had left, I had covered his full client list on top of my own. I had hit every deadline. I had resolved 4 major vendor issues that would have cost the company real money. I had stayed past 8 o'clock on more evenings than I could count. If there was a multiplier system based on performance, I should have known about it. I walked back to my desk without refilling my water bottle. That evening, I pulled up the employee portal and searched for any documentation about bonus structures. What I found raised more questions than it answered. And for the first time in 5 months, I stopped telling myself that everything was fine. My name is Stephen Edwards. I am 35 years old. I am the Senior Operations Coordinator at Whitmore Logistics, a mid-sized supply chain company based in Atlanta. I have worked here for 7 years. I am also black, and I mention that not to lead with it, but because it becomes part of the picture later, a part one only allowed myself to see clearly once I started looking. For 5 months, from late March through August, I absorbed the full responsibilities of a role previously held by Dion Carter. Dion was a junior coordinator who had been with the company 2 years before he resigned. When he left, his client accounts, vendor relationships, and daily task load were transferred to me. Mr. Calloway made it official in a brief email. There was no salary adjustment meeting, no title change, just 6 sentences ending with, "We appreciate your flexibility during this transitional period." At the time of that email, Dion had been earning a salary only 5% less than mine, despite 2 fewer years of experience and a lower job classification. After he left, I was doing both jobs for essentially the same pay. I told myself it was temporary, that leadership would recognize what I was carrying, that when bonus time came, it would all even out. It did not even out. The day Dion handed in his resignation was a Friday in late March. I remember it clearly because we had a vendor deadline that afternoon, and he came to my desk looking uncomfortable, like he was about to tell me something I wouldn't want to hear. "I put in my notice this morning," he said quietly. I looked at him. "When's your last day?" 2 weeks. Dion was not a bad worker. He was actually fairly good, detail-oriented and consistent, but he had been passed over for a promotion he was expecting, and he had found something better. I didn't blame him for leaving. I would have done the same. What I did not understand, at that moment, was how completely unready management was for his departure. Within 48 hours, Mr. Calloway had called me into his office. He sat across from me with his hands folded on his desk the way he did when he wanted to seem serious. We're going to post a position, he said. But these things take time. In the meantime, I need someone I can count on to hold things together. I asked about compensation. He said there would be a review after the new hire was on board. He said my flexibility during this period would absolutely be reflected in my annual bonus. I believed him. I should have asked for that in writing. The first 12-hour day happened in Dion's second week after giving notice. He was trying to hand over his accounts, but there was more to document than either of us had anticipated. His client files were inconsistent. Some vendors had been communicating with him directly on his personal email, rather than through the company system. There were informal agreements he had made that no one else knew about. I stayed until nearly 9 that night untangling it. I told myself it was a one-time thing. By the second week after he officially left, 12-hour days had become my normal. I was arriving at 7:30 in the morning and rarely leaving before 8 in the evening. I ate lunch at my desk. I answered emails on weekends. I handled a vendor escalation on a Saturday morning from my kitchen table while my coffee went cold. And through all of it, I kept telling myself the same thing. This is temporary. They are looking for someone. You are building goodwill. This will be recognized. The office was quiet most evenings. The building security guard, an older man named Roy, would pass by my floor on his rounds and nod at me. Sometimes he would stop. Still here, Mr. Edwards? Almost done, Roy. He would nod and move on. He knew, as well as I did, that I was not almost done. In May, Mr. Calloway held a department meeting to review our first quarter numbers. The results were good. Better than good, revenue from our division was up 11% compared to the same period the previous year. Client retention was at its highest in 3 years. The vendor issues that had created delays in February had been fully resolved. Mr. Calloway walked through the slides with a satisfied look on his face. This team has really stepped up, he said. I want to acknowledge that. Operations has been carrying a real load, and the numbers show it. Then he looked at me across the conference table. Stephen especially. He's been holding it down. People nodded. A few looked over at me. Marcus gave a small thumbs up. Patrice smiled. I smiled back. But afterward, when I returned to my desk and pulled up the payroll summary I was entitled to view as part of my HR access level, I confirmed what I already suspected. My salary had not changed. Not even a temporary adjustment. Not even a cost of living increase. Nothing. I had received public recognition in a meeting and a thumbs up from Marcus. That was the full compensation for 5 weeks of double workload. I went back to my desk and I kept working because that is what I had always done. But something had shifted, quietly and permanently. The math, when I finally did it properly, was hard to look at. Dion's salary before he left was $91,000. Mine was $95,500. That is a difference of $4,500, roughly 5%. When Dion was employed, our work was roughly divided down the middle. We each handled about 20 client accounts. We each managed our share of vendor relationships. We each had a realistic daily task load. After Dion left, his 20 accounts came to me. His vendor relationships came to me. His daily task load came to me. I was now doing the work of 2 people, paid as one, for a salary that had been only 5% higher than his to begin with. If you assigned even a modest dollar value to Dion's former responsibilities, let's say 70% of his $91,000, accounting for overlap, the company was getting approximately $63,000 of labor from me each year for free. Free. I wrote the number down on a notepad. $63,000. I underlined it. Then I turned the notepad over, so I could not see it, because looking at it made a feeling rise up in me that I was not yet ready to act on. But I had seen it now, and you cannot unsee a number like that. I started the spreadsheet on a Sunday afternoon in June. I opened a blank workbook, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table. Outside, my neighborhood was doing its weekend things. Lawn mowers, a basketball bouncing somewhere, kids running through a sprinkler 2 houses down. I created 5 columns. Date, task completed, time required, whether it was originally my responsibility or Dion's, and a dollar value, what the task would cost if the company had hired a contractor at standard market rates. I went back through my sent emails, calendar, and task logs. By Sunday evening, I had documented 11 weeks of work. The numbers in that fifth column added up to something that made me sit back and stare at the ceiling. Then I saved the file with a plain name, work log Q1, Q2, and closed the laptop. Monday morning, I was back at my desk. Same smile when Mr. Calloway said good morning. Same steady work through the day. But the spreadsheet was growing now, line by line, day by day. Because once you see the real numbers, you cannot unsee them. And I was not going to let those numbers stay invisible forever. The change was small at first and deliberate. I stopped staying past 6:30. I want to be clear about what this means because it's easy to misread. I did not start doing bad work. I did not miss deadlines that were mine to meet. I did not drop any ball that had been legitimately assigned to me. What I stopped doing was volunteering extra time to cover tasks that had never been formally given to me. I stopped treating Dion's former responsibilities as permanent additions to my role. When a task that belonged to his old job description came up, I completed it during standard hours, but I no longer stayed after hours to do the work I was not being paid to do. It was a precise kind of withdrawal, measured, professional. The first week, nothing happened. The second week, a minor vendor invoice sat unprocessed for an extra day because it had been Dion's account, and I handled it during business hours, not the evening before. The third week, a report went out slightly later than it used to. None of these things were crises. None of them were my fault, but they were visible. And in a department where everything had been running smoothly for 5 months, small slowdowns had a way of getting noticed. I was not doing anything wrong. I was simply, finally, doing exactly what I was paid to do. The first crack in the smooth surface appeared on a Tuesday. A vendor named Hargrove Supplies flagged a delayed shipment confirmation. It was an account that had belonged to Dion. Under the old arrangement, the unofficial, uncompensated one, I would have caught the issue the evening before and resolved it before anyone noticed. Under the new arrangement, it hit Mr. Calloway's desk as an unresolved ticket. He came to my office mid-morning with his brow furrowed. "The Hargrove thing," he said. "That wasn't handled?" I looked at him evenly. "It's on my list for this afternoon. It's not a priority one escalation. It used to get handled faster." I nodded calmly. "It used to get handled after hours." He looked at me for a moment. I think he understood what I was saying, but he was not ready to have that conversation yet. "Just make sure it's resolved today," he said. "Of course," I replied. He turned to leave, then paused. "Things have been feeling a little slower lately. Stephen, I need you to step it up again." I kept my voice completely neutral. "I'm happy to discuss my capacity and workload if that would be helpful." He said he would schedule something. He did not schedule something, but the clock was ticking now. The conversation I had been preparing for finally came 3 weeks later. Mr. Calloway called me into his office on a Wednesday morning. He had his usual posture, hands folded, leaning slightly forward, doing his impression of a serious leader. "I just want to check in," he began. "It feels like some things are slipping through the cracks lately. Nothing major, but enough that I'm noticing." I had thought carefully about this moment. I had rehearsed it in the mirror. I had written out the key points the night before and then put the paper away because I did not want to read from notes. I wanted to be calm and clear. "I understand your concern," I said. "I want to be transparent with you. Since Dion's departure in March, I've been operating at approximately 160% of my original workload. I've been managing that by working extended hours, often past 8 in the evening. But those hours were never part of my job description, and they were never compensated." Mr. Calloway's expression shifted slightly. "I'm fully committed to excellence within my assigned duties," I continued, "but I'm at capacity with what my role formally covers. If the expectation is that I continue at a higher volume, I'd appreciate a formal conversation about compensation." He blinked twice. I sat quietly and let the silence do its work. The client feedback arrived the following week, and it changed things. One of the accounts I had been managing, a long-term client named Fenwick Distribution, sent an email directly to our division's VP, a woman named Ms. Okafor, praising the quality of service they've received over the past quarter. The email was specific. It named me by name. It described how I had handled a complex customs delay in July with what the client called exceptional competence and calm communication. It said that working with me had been the smoothest operational experience they had in 3 years with the company. Ms. Okafor forwarded it to Mr. Calloway with a single line, "Nice work from your team." Mr. Calloway forwarded it to me with a smiley face. I saved the email in a folder I had labeled documentation. But something more important had happened. Ms. Okafor now knew my name. She had seen in writing that I was producing excellent results. The client had said so directly, and clients do not send those emails unless they mean it. I sent Ms. Okafor a brief, professional thank you note. I mentioned that I was looking forward to our upcoming performance review cycle and hoped to discuss the evolving scope of my role. She replied within an hour. She said she would enjoy that conversation. I filed her reply in the same documentation folder. The performance review came in September. I had asked for it. That was not the normal process at Whitmore. Reviews were scheduled annually, and mine was not due until December. But after my conversation with Mr. Calloway and Ms. Okafor's reply to my email, I formally requested an early review citing significant changes in my role. HR approved it. I prepared for 3 evenings straight. When I walked into the conference room, I brought a printed document, 14 pages. It contained my original job description from when I was first hired, Dion's job description pulled from the company's internal HR portal, a side-by-side comparison of responsibilities, and 7 months of data from my work log spreadsheet. I presented it calmly, the way I would present any operational analysis. The room was quiet by the 3rd slide. Mr. Calloway was there, along with the HR manager, a woman named Ms. Petrov and Ms. Okafor. I showed the workload split. Before Dion's departure, balanced. After his departure, 70% of the combined load resting on me. I showed the timeline. I showed the client outcomes. I showed the vendor escalations I had resolved. I showed the revenue figures from our department during the period in question. Then I showed my salary, unchanged for the duration. Ms. Okafor asked the CFO to join the next meeting. Mr. Calloway was very quiet for the rest of that afternoon. The budget excuse arrived quickly, as I knew it would. 2 days after the review meeting, Mr. Calloway stopped by my desk in the early afternoon. He had the look of a man who had been told to say something he did not entirely believe. "I want you to know that conversation was valuable," he said. "Leadership sees what you've been contributing. The data you put together was impressive." "Thank you," I said. "The challenge is that we're in a constrained budget period right now. Year-end planning is locked. We're not in a position to make salary adjustments until Q1 at the earliest." I nodded as if I was considering this seriously. "Of course," I said. "I understand budget cycles. I work in operations. I understand better than most how those decisions get made." He seemed relieved that I was taking it well. "We'll absolutely revisit this in Q1, he said. "I'd like that in writing." I replied, "Just a brief email confirming the timeline and what the review will cover." His expression flickered. "That's not really standard." "It doesn't need to be formal," I said pleasantly. "Just a note, so we're both aligned on expectations." He said he would send something. That evening, I noticed that the CFO had not looked convinced when Mr. Calloway gave the budget explanation in the review meeting. I made a note of that in my documentation file. The audit began without any announcement. I only knew about it because Ms. Petrov from HR sent me a calendar invite for what she called a supplemental compensation review. The description was brief, but the list of attendees included the CFO. I spent the weekend preparing additional documentation. When I arrived at the meeting, the CFO, a man named Mr. Bastian, was already seated. He had a printed copy of something in front of him. I recognized the format. It was my performance rating summary. "Exceeds expectations," he read aloud, as if confirming what he was looking at. "That's been your rating for the last 3 annual cycles." "Yes," I said. He looked at the second document in front of him. "And your overtime logs going back to March show consistent days running 12-plus hours." "That's correct." He looked at a third document. I did not need to see it to know what the number at the top said. There was a silence in the room. "Help me understand," Mr. Bastian said evenly, "how an employee rated exceeds expectations for 3 consecutive years, carrying documented 12-hour days and a 70% workload share, received the smallest bonus in the department." Mr. Calloway, sitting across from me, did not say anything. The audit had officially begun. The private conversation with Mr. Bastian happened after the formal meeting ended. Ms. Petrov stepped out. Mr. Calloway was sent to wait in his office. Mr. Bastian closed the conference room door and sat back across from me with a different kind of attention. Less formal, more direct. "Why didn't you escalate earlier? You clearly had the data. Why wait until the bonus?" I thought carefully before answering. I trusted that leadership would recognize the contribution. I said, "I believe the system worked the way it was supposed to. I gave the process a reasonable amount of time to correct itself. When it didn't, I built my case and brought it forward through proper channels." He looked at me for a moment. "That lands heavy," he said, almost to himself. "I'm not angry," I told him. "I just want to be compensated fairly for what I actually do." He nodded. "One more thing," he said. "Is there a replacement for Dion's role anywhere in the hiring pipeline?" I told him honestly that as far as I knew, no offer had gone out and no one had been hired. He wrote something down. His expression was unreadable, but I noticed he underlined whatever he had written. Twice. The structural weakness was now visible to anyone paying attention. After the audit meeting, Mr. Bastian spent 2 days meeting with people in our department. I was not in most of those meetings, but the atmosphere shifted. More closed doors, quieter hallways. Meanwhile, I continued doing exactly what I've been doing since September, my assigned duties during assigned hours at full excellence. No more, no less. And the cracks got harder to ignore. Without my after-hours buffer, certain vendor turnaround times were running 18 hours longer than before. 3 client issues had escalated to Mr. Calloway's desk that I would previously have resolved before he saw them. 2 reports that had always gone out on time were consistently a day late. These were not disasters. No client left. No contract was broken. But the pattern told a clear story. One person had been propping up this department on unpaid overtime for 7 months. Now that the overtime had stopped, the gaps were showing exactly where they had always been, just hidden. Mr. Bastian could see the gaps. More importantly, he could see their origin. Mr. Calloway tried once more. He messaged asking if I could be more available this week. I replied that I was fully available during business hours. He did not respond. The recruiter's message appeared on a Wednesday evening. I had been on professional networking platforms for years, but had never been especially active on them. I updated my profile occasionally, connected with people I had actually worked with, and mostly left it alone. I was not looking. I had not been looking. But someone had been looking at me. Her name was Carla Webb. She was a talent recruiter at a firm called Meridian Search Group. Her message was brief and professional. She had seen my profile. She noted my 7 years of operations management experience. She was working with a client, a logistics and supply chain company, that had an opening at the director of operations level. She thought my background might be a strong fit. Would I be open to a conversation? I read the message twice. Director of Operations. That was a title above my current role. I looked up Meridian Search Group. They were legitimate and well-regarded. I looked up the kind of compensation packages that came with Director of Operations roles in Atlanta logistics companies. The range I found was 40% above my current salary, on the low end. I thought about Mr. Calloway's budget constraints. I thought about the audit that was currently underway. I did not respond to Carla Webb immediately. I let the message sit for 48 hours. Then I replied that yes, I would be open to a conversation. The conversation with Carla Webb lasted 40 minutes. She was sharp and efficient. She asked good questions. She wanted to understand my experience with vendor management, client relations, team leadership during transitional periods. She asked about my comfort level with a larger scope of responsibility. I answered everything honestly because that is how I operate. By the end of the call, she was enthusiastic. 2 days later, She sent over a formal offer packet from her client. The title was Director of Operations. The base salary was a 43% increase over what I was currently making. The bonus structure was clearly written, tied to documented performance metrics, and would be reviewed quarterly. The hours were standard. The job description was explicit about it. I read the offer packet 3 times. Then I did something deliberate. I did not respond immediately. I did not tell anyone at work. I did not post anything, share anything, or drop any hints. But I also did not turn it off. I let it exist quietly in my email inbox because I understood something about timing. This offer had value in 2 directions, as an actual opportunity and as information. The right moment to use information is not always the moment you receive it. I saved the offer to my documentation folder. I went to work the next morning exactly as I always did, and I waited. The news reached Mr. Calloway before I had said a word to anyone. That is the thing about offices. They breathe. Information moves through them in ways that nobody fully controls. A conversation too close to an open door, a mutual connection on professional network. Someone who knows someone. I do not know exactly how he found out, but on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after I had received the offer, Mr. Calloway appeared at my desk with particular energy of a man who had just received information that alarmed him. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course," I said. In his office, he sat down with his hands folded in the familiar way. But there was something different in his posture now. He was leaning forward more than usual. There was a slight tightness around his eyes. "I've heard you might be entertaining other opportunities," he said. I kept my face calm and open. "I always stay aware of the market," I said. "That's good professional practice." "If there's anything we can do to," he started. "Mr. Calloway," I said gently, "I believe there's an audit review still pending. I think the right next step is to let that process complete." He opened his mouth and then closed it. "Of course," he said. He requested an emergency meeting with HR that same afternoon. Suddenly, the budget was very flexible. Interesting. The reckoning meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The attendees included Mr. Calloway, Ms. Petrov from HR, Mr. Bastian, and Ms. Okafor. I was asked to present my documentation one final time for the full leadership group. I arrived early. I set up the projector. I arranged my printed copies in neat stacks at each seat. When everyone was seated, I walked through it one more time, calmly, precisely. My original job description on the left side of the screen. Dion's job description on the right. Then the overlap analysis. Then the workload data by week, charted over 7 months. Then the bonus comparison. My 5% salary gap over Dion. My exceeds expectations performance rating 3 years running. My overtime logs. Hundreds of hours uncaptured in any compensation formula. My bonus figure against the rest of the departments. The last slide was a single bar chart. It showed the performance to compensation ratio for each member of the department. My bar was the furthest out of alignment with everyone else's by a wide margin. The room was silent. Ms. Okafor asked Mr. Calloway directly how the bonus allocations had been calculated. He tried to explain the budget framework. Mr. Bastian showed a different slide, one he had prepared himself. It broke down the bonus multiplier system. Mr. Calloway's authority over compensation decisions was removed that afternoon, effective immediately, pending a full review. The fall began quietly, the way these things do. After the Tuesday meeting, Mr. Calloway was moved to a coordination role in a different division. The announcement was framed carefully, a restructuring to better align departmental leadership with strategic priorities. HR language. Nobody in the office was confused about what it actually meant. He walked past my desk on his last day in our division. He did not stop. He did not make eye contact. He had the look of a man replaying a long sequence of decisions and arriving at the same conclusion each time. I did not feel satisfaction exactly. More like the quiet settling of something that had been slightly out of place for a long time, finally moving back into alignment. The formal compensation review findings were sent to me in writing by Ms. Petrov. The language was careful and corporate, but the conclusion was clear. The review had identified a significant misalignment between my documented contributions and my compensation during the period of March through September. The findings cited both the salary structure inherited from before Dion's departure and the bonus allocation methodology used by the previous division head. A formal counteroffer was being prepared. The external offer from Meridian Search Group was still sitting in my email inbox, valid for another 2 weeks. Ms. Okafor's assistant called to schedule a meeting with me for the following Monday. I confirmed the appointment and thanked her. Then I went back to work. The company's formal offer arrived on a Friday afternoon. Ms. Petrov walked it to my desk in person, which told me more about how seriously they were taking this than any number in the document could. I opened it at my desk after she left. A 30% salary increase, effective the 1st of next month. A retroactive bonus adjustment covering the full period from March through August, calculated using the same multiplier formula that had been applied to the rest of my department. Written documentation confirming that overtime beyond standard hours would henceforth be subject to a formal compensation agreement before it was expected. It was a good offer. It was also, I noted, less than what Meridian was offering. I sat with that comparison for a while. Then I asked to schedule a final meeting with Ms. Okafor before giving my answer. When we met, I asked her one direct question. I want to understand something, I said. The data I presented, the workload analysis, the performance ratings, the overtime logs, that data existed before the audit. It was available to anyone who looked for it. Why did it take an external offer for the compensation conversation to become urgent? She held my gaze. There was a long pause. She did not have an answer that satisfied either of us. I told her I needed the weekend to think. She said she understood. I made my decision on a Sunday morning. I sat at the same kitchen table where I had started the spreadsheet back in June. Both offers were printed and side by side in front of me. Whitmore's offer, 30%. Meridian's, 43%. The gap was not small. But salary was not the only thing I was measuring. I thought about 7 years of built relationships, the clients who knew my name, the vendor contacts, the institutional knowledge that takes years to accumulate. I thought about Ms. Okafor, who had listened and acted. I thought about the fact that the system, slow as it had been, had ultimately corrected itself because I had done the work of documenting everything clearly and presenting it with precision. Then I asked myself the harder question. Did I trust the environment going forward? I called Carla Webb and told her I was going to stay, but that I appreciated the opportunity. Then I called Ms. Okafor and told her I would accept under 3 conditions: transparent compensation metrics for all senior staff, a formal hiring plan to properly fill Dion's vacancy, written bonus criteria tied to documented performance. She agreed to all 3 without hesitation. I told her I would be ready Monday morning. My first week under the new structure, I left at 6 o'clock every evening. No guilt, no glancing back at my monitor, no Roy the security guard nodding at me on late rounds. I walked out into a parking lot that still had daylight in it. The 30% raise was real. The retroactive bonus cleared within the first week. Written bonus criteria were published to the full senior team the day I signed. 3 weeks later, HR posted Dion's former position properly, a full listing correctly scoped, with a salary range matching the actual responsibilities. They hired someone in 6 weeks. I gave her a clean, fully documented handover, the way it should have been done when Dion left. I have thought a lot about what this experience taught me. When I opened that bonus envelope and saw the number, I had a choice. I could have gotten angry. I could have walked out. I could have made it loud and personal. Instead, I went home and opened a spreadsheet. I documented everything. I let the facts make the argument. They called me valuable in every meeting for 7 months. But value is not what someone says about you while raising a toast. Value is what they're willing to put in writing when it costs them something real. Once I understood that distinction, I stopped working for applause. And I started working for what I was actually worth.